I say a very good morning to all the members, and a special good morning to our two keynote speakers for this session, Dr. Webster Zambara from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, and Ms. Anna Moyo from the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. I trust all of us had a good night's rest, and we are still thinking and reflecting on the two good presentations we had yesterday, which definitely will help us in the work that we have. But we should, I guess it is just fair and fitting that we should start this morning's session with a moment of silence in memory of one of our dear friends, Lucien Rakoto Malala from Madagascar. He was on the Human and Social Program, and he was also a member of of course, he was a member of the committee. We just learned that he passed away last night, and so let us keep a moment of silence to remember him, and of course at this time to remember his family who are going through this tough period. So let's do that. Okay, we pray for the repose of his soul. Amen. Thank you very much. And without any further ado, let us go straight into our program. And it is indeed my pleasure to welcome Dr. Webster Zambara to start his presentation, and after the two presentations, we will go into the deliberations for the day, and we will follow the same pattern as yesterday. So the theme this morning is the role of SADC-PF and national parliaments in promoting transitional justice in the SADC region. So Dr. Zambara, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much. Bon dia.
Bon dia.
I am very grateful to come here with my sister Anna from CSVR. So I would like to thank the SADC-PF for inviting our two institutions to come to you and to make this presentation. Time is not on our side, so I will not spend too much time on the protocols. I would do what you usually say, all protocols observed. When the chair said we had two good presentations yesterday, that scares us when we are about to present. But we are going to try our best. IGR and CSVR, between them, have 51 years of existence. We are celebrating 20 years of existence here at IGR, coming out of South Africa, TRC. And our sisters up there, CSVR, are older than us. They are 31 years old. Myself and my sister Anna, between us, we have more than 30 years of experience working in this field, and we've done this work in more than 20 countries across the continent and beyond. So when we got the invitation, we said, yes, this is a very important body that we need to engage with on a very important topic that touches all of us in Southern Africa. And let me just jump into it. We have shared with you a PowerPoint presentation. And the summary of the presentation is that I will start with a brief history of injustices in Southern Africa. And from then on, my sister will take up and fly with you. She will take a helicopter flight towards the frontiers of transitional justice, from the theoretical concept to the practicalities of it, because our two institutions were the key institutions that drove the creation and adoption of the African Union Transitional Justice Policy in February last year. We will also reflect on the SADC peace, security, democracy, and governance architecture to give us a framework. And we share with you our understanding of TJ concepts and tools. We will also discuss the role of SADC PF and national parliaments in promoting transitional justice, from which we are going to draw out some key recommendations before we conclude. If I am speaking too fast, please let me know.
Oh, no, you're
but
okay.
I'm going to jump into it. Mr. Chair, this session takes place using a method not very familiar to us because of COVID-19 that has changed our lives in many ways that are unforeseen and are still unfolding. But it is important that we commiserate with you. I am in Cape Town, my sister is in Joburg. Both sides are the one of Southern Africa in terms of COVID. So I know why you did not invite us personally. You are afraid that we could infect you. But it is also a very important period in this world, engulfed in trying to fight forms of violence that have lived with us for so long, emanating through what is called the Black Lives Matter, but also the gender-based violence that we are witnessing that we have to fight. But more importantly, as we discuss today's topic, is a letter written last week by the King of Belgium to the people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, regretting the atrocities of the past. That makes this topic so important for us. And in regretting the atrocities of the past, I've got a very big but. He did not apologize in any way. And Belgium is not talking of any compensation. Yet we all know that Belgium is one of the richest countries in the world because of plundering the economies of the Congo Basin, even including a genocide during what they called the Congo Free State, a personal estate of King Leopold. So to that effect, it is important for Southern Africa, and for this session of the SADC PF in particular, the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, to familiarize yourself and to take on this issue of transitional justice, because it could probably be the game changer that we are missing. I say so because our region is historically similar as it is dissimilar. Our lives are shaped by our historical experiences. And I've always termed this an unholy trinity of slavery and slave trade, colonialism, and apartheid. Those three unholy trinity combination is what shapes our sub-region. And this unholy trinity has nailed us on an unholy cross that our people face today. Violence in its forms that have dehumanized us and has normalized what is very abnormal. And violence in its many forms, social, economic, and its negative effects are all we can draw it from these experiences of slavery and slave trade, colonialism, and apartheid in Southern Africa. We can talk of the genocide against the Herero people of Namibia at the hands of the Germans. We talk also, I referred to the genocide against the people of the Congo by the Belgians. We talk of the dispossession and the plunder that came with colonialism. Not only did our people lose their land and wealth, they also lost their dignity and identity. And we woke up paupers in the land of our own. When we engaged in the wars of resistance and eventually liberation struggle for our independence, these were wars for justice and equality. And these are at the core of transitional justice. So far, only one country has fought and won the war of the soil, Zimbabwe. And the late President Robert Mugabe was never apologetic about it. That we were correcting the imbalances and injustices of the past, where 90% of all fertile land was owned by only 5% of the population who happened to be white. That is transitional justice. And when we rename our cities, roads, and villages from colonial names, we are regaining our identity, and that is transitional justice. And when we reclaim our ancestral land, and it goes across the sub-region, that is TJ. And sadly, in some cases, we seem to also have lost the values of liberation struggles we fought so gallantly and won, only to mirror the very wrongs that the colonial masters were doing to us, to the people we have liberated. This happens often through authoritarianism, treating political opponents and anyone who does not agree with those in power in the same way as colonial masters would treat us. And in some countries, elections means war. And members of the opposition after an election are either in hospital or in jail. These will seek transitional justice. Also, our cultural systems and beliefs sometimes dehumanize the others, especially women, children, the disabled, the elderly. These will need transitional justice. When we look at just the accusation that an elderly woman is a witch, so should be killed. When we look at the treatment of albinos in some of our countries, we need transitional justice. And corruption and plunder that is killing our livelihoods and causing indebtedness. This would cause all the challenges that we face in our countries, worsening inequalities and burdening our challenged people worse. And also, we have to deal with structural and cultural issues that are burdening us from the past and present. And in doing so, it would be very important for citizens to live their lives to the full if we provide avenues for justice, peace, reconciliation, and prosperity. We also need to find ways to deal with emerging threats to livelihoods that are affecting our region. These include climate change and the rise of violent extremism that are a threat to just and sustainable development and sustainable societies in Southern Africa. And this gives us a general framework of the realities that we have in SADC, that institutions like ourselves would wish to join with your institution and many other institutions to fight for post-conflict justice, peace, and reconciliation so that we build cohesive, well-heeled societies that are inclusive, fair, and democratic. I will stop it there and allow my sister to take up with you into the core of what transitional justice is, and then later we can open for discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Zambara. Okay, I will ask our sister, Ms. Moyo, to continue.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and all protocols observed. Thank you so much for this opportunity for us to present on transitional justice. As my brother Webster has already alluded, with all of this context in the SADC region and all of these issues, the legacies of the past and the current manifestations of violence and conflict, authoritarianism, and many other instances that necessitate us to address the consequences of violence. Transitional justice therefore offers some tools to address some of these occurrences, some of these legacies of the past, the gross human rights violations that come intertwined and as part and parcel of this conflict and of this violence in Southern Africa. Therefore, it is important that even as we address some of these consequences, we do so in a sustainable manner. We also guarantee non-recurrence in future. We ensure that never again do such occurrences come again in our future. And we also started looking at the SADC peace, security, governance, and democracy architecture, looking at some of the gaps that exist within this architecture and how transitional justice could come in as a tool to address some of these occurrences that my brother Webster has so well outlined. The peace and security approach in SADC is still very much ad hoc. It's piecemeal, it's narrow, and it does not in many instances address the root causes of the conflict and violence that we see in Southern Africa and many of the related challenges that come with such occurrences. And again, peace and security usually focuses on a heavily securitized and militarized approach to handling or addressing conflict. And this does not offer any reprieve or any victim-centric processes that enable victims to come to terms with the violence, the crisis, the tensions, and gross human rights violations that are attendant to such occurrences. There are also no guarantees of recurrence for the tensions, the crises, the conflicts, and the drivers and root causes that often remain in societies and in communities, triggering recurrence of conflict in the near future. And issues of collective trauma and the much needed healing for individual victims and affected communities that are affected by violence and societies at large that are usually also affected negatively by violence and conflicts are also usually left unaddressed. And again, this we have seen it in countries like South Africa, where this collective trauma continues to haunt the present, and also it threatens the future of generations and even the very generation that would have experienced the conflict. As one of our colleagues in the field, Brian Kagoro, puts it, we see that the youth or the next generation is angrier than the generation that faced the conflict. And this is because of some of this collective trauma that would not have been addressed going forward. How then do we come, or how then do we promote transitional justice as this tool that we are proposing to address these regional challenges? When we look at the definition of transitional justice, the African Union transitional justice policy went over and beyond the mainstream transitional justice that is offered by the United Nations when it comes to defining transitional justice, taking into account some of our own African experiences, contextual realities, and experiences of African people in their interaction and experiences of violence, of conflict, and many other challenges and many other instances that bring about gross human rights violations. And this is the definition that the policy, the continental policy that we keep talking about, which we're also hoping that the SADC region will also adopt and create its own framework to address its own contextual realities. It defines transitional justice. The policy defines transitional justice as the various policy measures and institutional mechanisms that societies, through an inclusive consultative process, adopt in order to overcome past violations, divisions, and inequalities, and to create conditions for both security and democratic and socio-economic transformation. And all these dimensions are really important because we're seeing that we're going beyond the retributive aspect of justice. We're drawing on traditional justice approaches. We're emphasizing conciliation and reconciliation, community participation, restitution, or what we also call restorative justice. And we are seeking to address the African concerns on violent conflicts and impunity through taking into account some of these contextual realities, the cultural nuances of affected societies and communities, including the gender issues, the gender dimensions of violations and brutalization, the generational and ethno-cultural, socioeconomic and developmental dimensions of peace and justice. And this is really important, especially when we look at the history, the context that my brother Webster gave of historical legacies of the past that continue to haunt the present, the issues of marginalization and exclusion, inequality that is so endemic in the region, that is also very much the root cause of some of the protests, the violence, and some of the tensions that we continue to see in societies in Southern Africa. And transitional justice also seeks to establish truth about what happened. It facilitates peace, social healing, reconciliation, justice, reparations, and accountability after a society has experienced brutality, after it has experienced violence and violations, victimization, brokenness, and breakdown of political, social, economic, institutional, and psychological well-being of citizens, and the psychological well-being, the very social fabric and order in society. Therefore, transitional justice, the way we are conceptualizing it and the way we are really marrying it to the context is mainly concerned with addressing the past, securing the present, and building a future, a peaceful future where everyone's development and empowerment is prioritized. Now we will look at some of the dimensions of justice that are important to address some of the SADC contextual realities. Redistributive justice is really important for addressing inequalities and marginalization resulting from the colonial era violations. It consists, amongst other things, in giving back their property, such as land, to previous or original owners. My brother spoke about Belgium, spoke about Namibia. These are some of the examples, the Zimbabwean case, and South Africa, we saw in 2019 also starting to address the land issue as well. So redistributive justice is really important as well in also distributing equally opportunities and access to resources. That is really important, especially after the violent, brutal, and unequal past that most Southern African countries came out of. Restorative justice is also important, especially for restoring the dignity of victims of conflict and violence and repairing the damages caused by conflicts and violence, again, restoring victims and affected communities' pre-conflict conditions. Of course, this is still a very much contested field about restoration, especially where there has been loss of life, but that acknowledgement also restores the peace and order and the harmony in communities, especially where we need those who were fighting before to live alongside each other, and we expect them to be reconciled. Transformative and developmental justice is really important, and also considering that SADC, one aspect of SADC is to ensure development and regional reintegration. It's important again that transformative and developmental justice is also attained for addressing victims' structural and systemic vulnerabilities through the improvement of their circumstances and their political and social empowerment. Retributive justice is also important for ending impunity and ensuring deterrence, ensuring that perpetrators do not get away with violence or conflict, and also making sure that this never again happens in the future. Now I'm going to look at some of the specific elements of transitional justice that are important for the SADC region. We look at the peace processes, which are usually contained in peace agreements in Africa. And we have examples in Southern Africa about some of these processes, therefore underscoring the very fact that transitional justice is not a new phenomena. These are not new concepts, these are not new practices, but Southern African countries have gone through some of these processes, continue to go through some of these processes, and it is important to even consider some of these processes for some of the current occurrences and future conflicts that are most likely to occur if we don't address the past and secure the present. Peace processes are aimed at bringing to an end any ongoing violence, conflict, and removing the threats of further violence impacting the affected population or society. Sometimes it could be communities, as we know, and as we have experienced it in Mozambique. Conflict is also most likely to occur in one part or in one province of a country, not affecting the whole country, but again, the spillage of conflict to other parts of the country, even sometimes affecting the whole society, requires that these issues are dealt with at a national level. Peace agreements also include provisions of protection and security guarantees for civilians in the conflict or in violence affected areas. And some of the mechanisms, as I've highlighted, for pursuing the peace elements in transitional justice include peace negotiations, mediation efforts, and peace agreements. An example that I've given of Mozambique, maybe I can go back a little bit. Just in August 2019, Mozambique signed a peace accord, the Peace and National Reconciliation Agreement, that led to the cessation of hostilities, disarmament, and reintegration of RENAMO officers into government. And it also paved the way for the 2019 elections in Mozambique. And this is one example of peace agreements with transitional justice aspects included in it. Therefore, it's important, especially when we are going to speak about transitional justice within a peace agreement, it's important that we also look at peace agreements or peace processes from a transitional justice perspective, where we ensure that from the outset, the very negotiation and mediation processes include victims and consult victims, those affected communities and affected people in society are also part and parcel of the negotiations that try to negotiate peace and moving forward. This will also ensure that the implementation of transitional justice is also inclusive and there's legitimacy going forward. There's a tendency to leave out communities. Usually we know that within the negotiation table, there is usually just the warring factions and they agree on terms. And even where transitional justice becomes part and parcel of these negotiations, there's never political will, there's never legitimacy of the transitional justice proper. There's never there's never any motivation to take them forward, because those who agreed really did not take into consideration the various dimensions of transitional justice and the follow-on processes that need to take place going forward to secure and to implement the transitional justice dimensions of peace agreements. Truth commissions are also very important in Southern Africa, and we have seen with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa how important this mechanism or this process of transitional justice, of truth-telling, truth-seeking, how important it is for victims where they come forward to talk about what happened to them. And also through investigations of a past history of violations of human rights, in particular, victims begin to get satisfaction and they get some form of reprieve, some form of justice in just telling their stories, knowing that in some instances, perpetrators are also known, and there are follow-on processes to ensure that perpetrators do not go get away with it. We have seen, for instance, in Zimbabwe currently, the Zimbabwe National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, whose mandate is also derived from the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission Act, as one of the current examples of truth-seeking, truth-telling commissions addressing some of the historical and current manifestations of violence and conflict-related occurrences, such as gross human rights violations. And again, some of the issues that come out around truth commissions are how far back do we go in addressing some of these concerns. And of course, we know the Zimbabwean one goes as far back as pre-colonial era violations, which of course, again, the thinking around how to address some of those issues need to be part and parcel of the process going forward. Because again, when victims come forward to tell their truth, there is an expectation that something should be done and will be done regarding those violations, and that some form of justice for victims will be secured. Again, we see here the role of Parliament, because some of these commissions are set up through an act of legislation, which really is within the purview of Parliament, where Parliament actually passes some of these acts some of these legislative measures that set up set up the operational and the operational aspects of truth commissions, including also the implementation and the post-implementation aspects. Therefore, the role of Parliament in some of these processes can never be overemphasized. Reconciliation is also an important element of transitional justice for the SADC region, as it involves addressing some of the legacies of past violence and conflict reconstruction of broken relationships, and finding ways for individuals and communities to live together. Reconciliation is both a goal of transitional justice and a standalone process that also requires specific measures, initiatives, and programs, long-term programs to achieve it. Meaningful reconciliation focuses really on building trust that is necessary for a degree of cooperation between individuals and communities. And we see reconciliation and social cohesion issues being very important, especially for harmonious living in communities where people who would have fought before now need to move forward and have relationships of trust and live harmoniously alongside each other to ensure that the issues that existed before that led to conflict or that fueled conflict are done away with. There is understanding, there is empathy, there is tolerance within these communities going forward. Tolerance of one another, tolerance of diversity, of difference, and tolerance of different opinions is very important. And reconciliation helps us to achieve this. Reconciliation, again, should not be confused with forgiveness, which really is a personal matter between an individual victim and perpetrator, as the state cannot forgive on behalf of individuals. And this is where usually there is a mistake when it comes to transitional justice, where the state feels that they can ask for forgiveness on behalf of perpetrators, on behalf of victims, and they can receive this forgiveness on behalf of victims. And reconciliation has nothing to do with forgiveness, but really tries to build the relationships, build the trust, become a bridge towards bringing everyone together to coexist harmoniously and also to tolerate one another's difference and diversity. It's essential, and also it's a prerequisite for reconciliation that healing is put at the center of any reconciliatory efforts, which includes regard for each other's suffering. Reparations, as my brother Webster spoke earlier when he spoke about the example of Belgium, that there is no compensation that is being offered by Belgium to the Congo for the violations, colonial era violations. Reparations is really important. Perhaps it's one of the elements of transitional justice that really put the victims' experiences and their suffering at the center of transitional justice processes. And following violent conflict and mass atrocities, reparations help us to acknowledge the wrongdoing suffered by victims and addressing some of their needs. We have material reparations, which really include, amongst other things, restitution of access and title to property that was taken or lost. Sometimes it also includes a restoration of citizenship for people who would have been in exile. And given Southern Africa's history of colonialism, where many people left their countries and were exiled elsewhere, they lost their citizenship. This return is part of material reparations, and we have seen it being implemented before in the region. It also includes release from custody of those who would have been arbitrarily arrested or prisoners of war, for instance. It also includes reinstatement of a person's good name in the event where someone has been dubbed a terrorist or someone who is a danger to society. It also includes medical, psychiatric, or occupational rehabilitation that is usually needed by victims who would have been tortured or who would have been victims of gross human rights violations resulting in their trauma. Material reparations may also include monetary compensation for victims and survivors. And Namibia is one country that in 2018, 2019, and even now up to April 2020, they have been claiming reparation and memory from Germany for the atrocities that were committed, the genocide against the Herero people in Namibia. This is part of this is part of addressing victims' experiences and their violations and brutalization at the hands of the perpetrator at the time. Collective reparations include restitution of property, communal lands, public buildings, and compensation in the form of money or services that benefit the community, not individual victims per se. And memorialization is also part of reparations, where sometimes specific days of remembrance are set up or established, naming parks and buildings or monuments, renaming streets or schools that my brother Webster spoke about earlier, preserving archives or establishing sites of conscience on previous sites of abuse. These are also very important because for victims, it gives them that sense of knowing that there is that acknowledgement of the wrong that was done to them at a societal level. Some of the holidays that we celebrate, for instance, in South Africa, Freedom Day is one of the ways we memorialize the ending of apartheid and also the beginning of a new era, a democratic society in South Africa. 18 April in Zimbabwe, Independence Day, again marking a democratic era in the country, for instance. So some of these days are really important as they remind us of a brutal past and how far we have come in addressing it, and also in ensuring our self-determination and our empowerment as citizens of Southern African countries. Moral reparations are also important and include telling one story and having it acknowledged by a public body. And it is an important part of healing, of a healing process, of disclosure of facts of a victim's mistreatment or a loved one's death, a disclosure of their names and positions of those responsible, and so forth. And these are also very important when we are addressing victims, victimization, brutalization, and victimhood. Justice and accountability really deals with holding those perpetrators or those who've been identified as perpetrators accountable for the violations that they may have committed. This could have been proved through a truth commission or any other process within a country. And really, we have seen national courts taking on this capacity of justice and accountability, but we have instances where national courts really do not have the capacity to provide justice and accountability, especially where violence or conflicts have resulted in mass atrocities affecting almost everyone in society or a larger group of people. And as we know, court processes are usually long-winded and they're quite singular in their approach, and it could take years for victims to finally get justice. Therefore, in instances where the conflict or the violations are widespread and they've been systemic, special courts could be established to address specifically the violations that happened within a specific time in history of violence, of conflict, of war, or any other occurrence that resulted in widespread gross human rights violations. And it's important, again, within transitional justice that such justice and accountability processes do not result in a victor's justice, where the one who is in power is the one who metes out justice for those who are not in power. It's important that accountability should apply to all sides of the conflict. If perpetrators are from both sides, it's important that all sides should be held accountable for the crimes committed and for the violations committed. Guarantees of non-recurrence are also very important in the SADC region, again, because they really guarantee that never again will this occur. And if it's not, if guarantees of non-recurrence are not dealt with, we are likely to see recurrence of conflict in the future, in the immediate or in the immediate near future, or in the future to come for the next generations. And it includes institutional reforms, establishment of human rights institutions, development of new constitutions, amendment of existing ones, especially where existing ones also created unequal societies, were discriminatory, and so forth. Educational reform is also important, and writing an inclusive history and the inclusion of human rights and education in the national curriculum, where even the next generation learns about what happened in the past, and they also have a duty to ensure that it doesn't happen again in future. If guarantees of non-recurrence are not undertaken, really it becomes a danger, not only for the generation that experienced the conflict, but also for the future generations. So it's important that these reforms also happen. It could also be legislative reform, it could also be security reforms, and so forth. They are all part of guaranteeing non-recurrence. Traditional justice mechanisms are really important in the Southern Africa context, especially given that formal justice mechanisms usually do not address all the violations, the brutalization, and the issues the conciliation issues that are important for harmonious living for those affected communities, where conflicts, those who were warring against each other or those who were fighting against each other are now supposed to live alongside each other peacefully and harmoniously. And they can be adopted and used alongside the formal mechanisms of justice to address issues of peace, accountability, social cohesion, reconciliation, and healing. They're really good in fostering integration, reintegration, and reconciliation, and are widely accepted in many of our communities. And they complement, even under normal circumstances where there is no war, where there is no conflict or gross human rights violations, they complement formal justice mechanisms, and they are good in dispute settlement and often go a step further than formal justice mechanisms in rebuilding relationships, addressing social stigma, reintegrating offenders in communities, and ensuring social harmony and peaceful existence in communities. We don't get to see this from the courts, for instance, where justice within a court setting means removing the offender from society and locking him up either in prison or in a correctional service. But for victims, really, there's not much benefit from this process. And when the offender comes out of jail, you see that again, there are tensions even within the community, especially where people were warring or were fighting alongside tribal, ethnic, political party lines. It's important that traditional justice mechanisms complement formal justice mechanisms in ensuring that reintegration and the social cohesion aspects of justice going forward. We have examples in Africa generally of the Gacaca system in Rwanda, which was a traditional justice mechanism that was adapted to service a larger goal of transitional justice to address the widespread violations and the many victims who could not all go through the national courts to get justice. We have the Magamba spirit mediums in Mozambique as another example of traditional justice mechanisms that really facilitated the reintegration of the Renamo soldiers who had gone into war and now needed to come back to society. Zimbabwe also has its own processes, for instance, and many of our countries also have had their own processes of reintegrating those who had gone into war and bringing them back to society, where they are widely accepted by their families and by the communities where they lived before, for instance. These are also very important for Southern Africa, especially where there are beliefs in communities of specific rituals of bringing someone back or of reintegrating someone. Some could be religious, some could be traditional, and so forth. But all of these are also very important. The local justice structures are really important, and most community members understand them better, they know them better, and for them, this is the form of justice that is needed. Our chiefs in many communities in Southern Africa play this part very well of reconciliation and meting out justice that really is acceptable for both the perpetrator and the victim, and that really seeks to appease and facilitate harmonious living going forward. Diversity management is also an important transitional justice element for Southern Africa, and it addresses the group dimension of conflicts and violations where violence is organized and perpetrated along ethnic, religious, or regional lines, or a combination of any of these lines. Diversity management is important in societies with ethno-cultural polarization and animosity features that become prominent parts of conflicts, or where authoritarian violence targets particular ethnic, religious, or regional groups. The measures that should be undertaken to address ethno-cultural justice, or what we call diversity management, must include the establishment of policies and institutions that promote tolerance and accommodation between members of different communities, nationalities, language, ethnic groups, and so forth, and foster social cohesion amongst those who may be diverse in opinion, in language, in beliefs, in traditions, in cultures, and so forth. There should also be regulatory measures for combating hate speech and similar acts that incite violence and fuel communal division and tension. There must also be periodic dialogues between and celebration of diversity involving religious, community, political leaders, as well as representatives of affected communities, targeting in particular the youth, the next generation. As I said earlier, that if these issues are not addressed, of polarization, of managing diversity, those who may not have been affected directly by these conflicts would be much angrier than those who actually experienced it firsthand. Therefore, it's important in ensuring transgenerational peace and also addressing transgenerational trauma. Again, institutional measures should also be put in place to ensure equitable representation of members of various communities in national and local decision-making structures. These are some of the strategies for addressing issues of diversity or managing diversity in communities, which could easily be a trigger of conflict and violence if they are left unchecked. Redistributive justice or socioeconomic justice, I highlighted it earlier, is also very important because this now refers to the socioeconomic and development measures that should be designed to rectify some of the structural inequalities, the exclusions, the marginalization towards achieving social justice and equitable and inclusive development. Redistributive measures must address some of the underlying socioeconomic marginalization and exclusion and must contribute to preventing a relapse to violence or conflict. In most African countries, for instance, socioeconomic factors, exclusion, marginalization have been identified as root causes of conflict. In such countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia, Tunisia, and maybe to give a much more recent example, the violent extremism, for instance, in northern Mozambique, one of the key drivers that have been identified or the root causes include marginalization and exclusion when it comes to development and so forth. So it's important that redistributive justice becomes an element that the SADC region really takes up in addressing some of the occurrences in the region. In transitional justice, application of redistributive justice includes land reform and protection of property rights, including traditional ownership, access and use of land and resources on land by all. Affirmative action development packages for historically marginalized groups or regions or those affected by violence are also important, and having regard to inequalities within communities as well as wealth resource sharing and power sharing arrangements to bring about that equitable justice and equitable development for all. I will now hand over to my brother Webster to continue, Dr. Webster Zambara, to continue now where we are looking at the role of the SADC PF and national parliaments in promoting transitional justice using the very mandates that parliaments have in doing so. And he will also take us through the concrete recommendations and the conclusion. My brother Webster, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. But I'm also looking at my watch. I mean, it'll be good if you could do the presentation in, let's say, 10 minutes for the conclusion so that other members can come in. Let's try that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. And due to time, I'm not going to take much time because we want to give time. You already have the presentation, so I'm going to just emphasize the fact that as parliamentarians, you know your roles. We don't want to get to your roles. You know them. You represent the people, and you can drive change at national level with the authority vested in you. So I'm going to jump to key recommendations, which I think we need to dwell on and we can expand on. One is that SADC PF should use the African Union Transitional Justice Policy as a guide to formulate a regional transitional justice framework and mechanism to guide post-conflict justice and reconciliation processes in Southern Africa. I think that is key. And that is perhaps the most important reason why we are talking to you now and why we were invited. That this committee and the SADC PF broadly and parliamentarians, which is our second recommendation, that national parliaments should lead in creating the regulatory frameworks and monitoring mechanisms for all transitional justice processes. I think this is very key. I say so from experience. I am one of the people who were invited by UNDP in Zimbabwe to help build the capacity of the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. And one of our roles was to draft the regulatory frameworks for the Zimbabwean Parliament, which they adopted in March 2017. And in that process, it was long, but it gave Parliament enough knowledge of the concepts and also drew up the regulatory frameworks that are being used by the Commission now. The other key recommendation which we advise is that violence and conflicts leave societies traumatized. And when people are traumatized, the next thing is they are itching for another chance for revenge. So in this regard, we urge parliaments to prioritize legislation that states should provide mental health and psychosocial support to victims. So we are looking at a situation where parliaments are also involved in drafting how societies can improve from a difficult, painful past towards a harmonious living through a legislative agenda. And we also conclude by advising that parliaments should uphold and promote legitimate indigenous knowledge systems and values that enhance transitional justice at local and national level. This is one of the most difficult things, especially in us in the global south, where some of our practices would be rendered as they're ignored. Yet, if we do not do them, any transformative agenda will lose value. So we've got our own cultural systems in every country, and the AUTJ policy is very clear that every context matters. When you move from one country to another, when you move from one society to another, there are some practices that they would do in post-conflict situations to make sure that there is peace, justice, and reconciliation. In that regard, we want to conclude by upholding that SADC-PF is so representative with more than 3,500 parliamentarians in a broad region with about 300 million people. So engaging with SADC-PF and civil society and think tanks like ourselves gives us room to explore how we can build a regulatory framework, transitional justice regulatory framework for our region. So your forum can play an important role to facilitate effective implementation of the African Union Transitional Justice Policy at national level and in the region. And also the broader legislative oversight and accountability mandates that we have are key in driving regional mechanisms such as a transitional justice framework to build capacity for justice, peace, and reconciliation. Otherwise, the rest is what we have given you. And for now, myself and my sister Anna, we would like to thank you once again for providing us this opportunity, and we can open for some discussions if there are any points of clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Zambara and Ms. Moyo. I think the two presentations really must have aroused quite a bit of sentiments in all the members, especially those who coming from countries which are actually going through the process. And I must point out that I was a little surprised that you did not mention Seychelles. And being from Seychelles, of course, you see the sensitivity is there, because right now we are going through such a process. We have a Truth, Reconciliation and National Unity Commission, which is doing its work, and many of the things that you've mentioned, we are actually going through right now, and hearing the stories of the of the victims, and seeing the courage of so many witnesses coming forward have just been overwhelming for our people. And of course, the whole process started in Parliament, and this is where I think the Seychelles example would be good for SADC PF to also look at, because everything started in Parliament, and the law was it was a private member's bill. Well, no, it was part of the recommendation of a joint committee from both sides of the House, and the law was then adopted by government, and we passed it. So I think it'll be a good model for SADC PF to look at, because as I mentioned, we are currently going through the process, and there's a lot of pain that is being experienced, and a lot of what you've mentioned, and some of the issues, for example, of monetary compensation, which is real. People are asking, why should taxpayers who were not involved in the abuses be responsible for paying the compensation? Shouldn't the perpetrators who benefited be the ones paying for the compensation? And so there are a number of issues, but Seychelles is not the case that we are looking at now, but looking at the topic generally. So the floor is now open, and unfortunately we don't have much time, but let's get the ball rolling. And do I see anyone? I mean, in the chats, if anyone wants to take the floor, just give an indication, and you'll be able to address the issue. But I must say, both presentations definitely aroused a lot of interest in me, because maybe I should mention that I actually chaired the parliamentary committee that set up that kicked off the whole process. Anyone who wants to add their contribution? Josefina, is that no?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Acho que sim, Presidente, muito obrigada. Eu quero agradecer, portanto, pelas duas intervenções, e também agradecer ao nosso Presidente por ter, digamos, partilhado e posto aqui um bocado em evidência o exemplo da Seychelles. Angola já não se pode considerar um país pós-conflito, se calhar no rigor do termo, já passam quase 18 anos, mas ainda existem também muitas feridas do passado. O governo tem estado a fazer esforços no sentido, digamos, de podermos ultrapassar esses traumas do passado, mas foi aqui mencionado o aspecto, digamos, da resolução, digamos, de todos os problemas em países em situação de pós-conflito, que eu acho que é muito, muito importante. Eu gostei particularmente das recomendações que o Dr. Zambara e os nossos irmãos Dr. Zambara e Ana Moio, portanto, apresentam como uma eventual saída para o fórum como tal, procurar, digamos, gizar um quadro global que possa aproveitar a SADC. Eu acho que todos os países, uma grande parte dos países da SADC passaram por situações de conflito de uma forma ou de outra. Há recalcamentos que vêm do tempo colonial, há recalcamentos que vêm do período de guerra que nós vivemos, há recalcamentos também que às vezes decorrem, não é? Que são um misto dos recalcamentos que vêm do tempo colonial e dos recalcamentos que surgem até mesmo do ponto de vista político, pela impossibilidade de algumas forças políticas chegarem ao poder. Então, temos os problemas que o Zimbábue viveu. O nosso presidente já referiu a Seychelles. Temos os problemas que Moçambique está a viver. Temos também, não deixarão de haver recalcamentos noutros países da SADC. Eu acho, quero concordar com os preletores, no sentido de que precisamos de pensar num quadro global para, digamos, fazermos face como região, podermos fazer face a esta questão da justiça transicional que é muito importante. As questões culturais decorrentes daí. Por exemplo, nós em Angola tivemos uma guerra tão profunda, muitas famílias perderam absolutamente todos os seus membros. Eu sempre me questiono como é que alguém pode sobreviver por muitos exercícios que se façam, como é que alguém pode sobreviver deixado no mundo só, sem mais ninguém, em consequência de uma situação de violência. Então, acho que devemos trabalhar no sentido das recomendações feitas e aprofundar a discussão, eventualmente, no sentido de, no futuro, com algumas pesquisas mais, e isto é uma observação para os nossos leitores, uma pesquisa um bocado mais abrangente. A SADC tem 14 países membros, é uma pesquisa um bocado mais abrangente e nós, como fórum, devemos continuar nesse sentido, para que eventualmente avancemos para um quadro da SADC sobre esta matéria ou eventualmente uma lei modelo, mas são questões muito profundas e acho que o ultrapassar dessas questões constituem condição sine qua non para nós podermos de facto avançar de forma segura para o desenvolvimento da nossa região, dos nossos países, sem esses recalcamentos que, por muito que às vezes queiramos ignorar, são muito profundos e devem, é nossa responsabilidade como parlamentares, dar um contributo substancial sobre essa matéria. Presidente, são os meus comentários por agora e quero uma vez mais agradecer também o facto de ter partilhado o exemplo da Seychelles. Talvez depois nós possamos ter também disponível a lei que foi adotada para servir também como referência do estudo a continuar e dos nossos parlamentos nacionais. Muito obrigada, Presidente.
Okay, yes, definitely. We'll let, I will share the piece of legislation with the committee. Thank you very much, Honorable Josefina. Anna, you'd like to come in? Oh.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And thank you, Honorable Chair, for raising the Seychelles case. It's one of the most recent ones, and Parliament indeed played a very big role in recommending the process and also enacting an act of Parliament for that process. It's really one of the cases, best practices where Parliament really plays a pivotal role in this process and even in the monitoring going forward as well through the committees as well. And indeed, as has been highlighted, there's a lot that, so when we look at conflict, for instance, there's a lot that that becomes consequences of conflict. And in most instances, it cannot be simply addressed by one mechanism, such as a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in one sitting that usually has, that is time bound and that is a mandate for just a short period of time. There is a need sometimes to even revisit some of the processes that may have been undertaken in the past to see how far we have come and to see some of the residual issues that still continue outside that context within a democratic setting, for instance. And this is why even the African Union Transitional Justice Policy offers so many elements of transitional justice, where one process can kickstart the process towards a sustainable peace. However, there are many other processes that could be follow-up processes going forward that help the country to move forward. For instance, if it's discovered that issues of transformative justice or redistributive justice are still very much not addressed, this can then be revisited going forward to address some of these issues in the future, or in the current setting, for instance, even if there is no war. And also from the definition, we saw that the scope of transitional justice is not only limited to war settings or conflict settings, but it can also address some of the democratic governance deficits, developmental deficits that may crop up in the current setting or in the future as well. These can be addressed through a transitional justice process. And as one of the honorable speakers shared just now, the issue of Angola, again, we're seeing that 18 years after the conflict, there's still traumatization. And what my brother Webster recommended, that the promotion of legitimate indigenous knowledge and value systems that enhance transitional justice at a local and national levels becomes very important. And the psychosocial issues become important even going forward. This can still be recommended going forward to address some of the unresolved issues of the past, or some of the issues that have remained unaddressed by a formal transitional justice process. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Anna. Can I call on one of our new members, Honorable Lesedi from Botswana? You'd like to share some of your thoughts with us? Hello.
Chair. Good morning, Chair.
Hello. It looks as if we're not able to hear you.
How are you?
No, there seems to be a problem with your.
Chair, can you hear me?
No, we're not. I'm not hearing you properly. It looks as if there's a problem with your line. Can you try again? No. No, we're not. No, we're not.
Good morning, Chair.
No. There's a problem. I mean, we'll get back to you. And if I may turn to Honorable Indiweni.
I have a problem.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah.
And thanks so much to the two presenters on such pertinent topics on transitional justice. But my worry is where exactly, like civil society and all other stakeholders, where should they come in? Because I feel if we look at SADC, most of the countries had wars before independence, and we had agreements with the fighters from both sides, the colonialists and the fighters had agreements. So should civil society not come in at that juncture and made sure that these agreements had provisions for all these things that we are talking about? All these psychosocial, all these provisions for transitional justice, if they were put in the initial agreements, don't you think it would have been easier going forward? I want to look at an example of my country, Zimbabwe, where we had retributive justice. We had to carry out land reform 20 years down the line. Then it looks like, it's something wrong that you are doing, yet these are things that they know that should have been done even soon after independence. You see? So if it takes longer and you then start looking at it and trying to correct the imbalances, then the outsiders will feel like, no, you're doing something wrong. It's retribution now. See, like revenge of some sort.
Okay. Okay. Shall I ask Dr. Zambara to respond to these comments, please?
Thank you very much, Honorable Nduweni. We are bringing a very interesting aspect, but I also want to start with the chair. If we had known that you were part and parcel of the legislative agenda of the Truth and Reconciliation and National Unity process, half of what we have said you should have just shared with your colleagues.
No.
But more important, I think, more important with the essentials issue is how far back you have gone. You are dealing with issues of the coup that happened in 1977. And
yes.
Atrocities, some murders that happened in 1981, 82, 83. I think that is where the lesson is. That even if we are talking of 40 years ago, the pain in some people's hearts needs to be dealt with so that you move together forward.
That's right.
Thinking that you can ignore it time after time, it will not work. And the danger is the pain of 40 years ago is a seed for future violence. So if you can deal with it, then you are assured that everything is going to be in the right direction. And so also with the situation in Angola, which is only 18 years ago, but if you visit Angola, you can easily see that things are not yet normal for the common person. So the need for transitional justice and the need to talk through this process is key. Honorable Nduweni, in 1980, when Zimbabwe became independent, the term transitional justice did not exist in what is now, it is existing now. What was new during that time was peace building. And even then, peace building was not regarded as important because the fighters, they would look at civil society and say, who are you to tell us this? It's out of the experiences now, and also the academic realm opening research in these issues that we are discovering that it is very, very important. Now, sometimes when I'm invited in these processes, you get in and you find people very ready that we are ready to talk peace. And my first question would be, but I'm not seeing women here. Then you find men turning around and realizing that actually they want to talk about a peace process among men, yet the population is higher among women. So those are some of the things that we're beginning to realize. And going forward, parliaments should make it a point that inclusivity of not only political actors, but key ingredients like civil society, the academia, are also brought along to share their thoughts so that a holistic approach can be thought through properly. And as we go forward, I think the mistakes of 1980 in Zimbabwe and many other countries as they had their transitions should not be repeated. Because if you repeat the mistakes, you are actually watering the seeds of the next cycle of conflict. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. I think you've summarized it so beautifully. And you are right in saying the pain of 40 years ago is as alive, as sensitive today than way back. Madam SJ, it looks as if you have some wise thoughts to share with us. No?
Thank you for the opportunity, Chair. I actually don't have any wise words. I'm hoping that the committee can map out interventions from the presentations yesterday and today that we may package into programmatic and political outputs. These are quite interesting. The they put us into another path. I think we can look at various pathways that this committee can actually enhance its delivery. There's a component of participatory democracy that has been raised, which is quite critical. There are elements of the whole issue of peace and security that we could map out and are able to package for the committee. There's a whole opportunity that I see in terms of research and accountability that this committee can package and be able to run with. In this period of COVID, I think it's an incubation period and the opportunity for us to incubate some of these thoughts and be able to look at how we can begin to ensure that our work is indeed felt by the citizens, that political activism, one or the other, is actually realized. And at the same time, we can lead in terms of looking at instruments that speak to some of these issues, where we can develop guidelines, as alluded to yesterday, interpret treaties and come up with regulations that would guide parliaments, among others. Thank you, Chair. I was not raising my hand, but since I was summoned.
But in fact, Madam SG, I really think what you just said is so important for the region, because okay, when we look at the discussions of yesterday, when we looked at the trends and the strength of the judiciary, the Electoral Commission, and today we've also heard the two presenters talk about strong institutions, human rights institutions, and others. I mean, we can straight away talk about the role of the ombudsperson and everything. So, are we, maybe the committee and SADC PF should somehow look at how we can also build strong institutions, so that we move from having strong tribal leaders and putting the confidence in institutions, because people can change, but if we can have those strong institutions, like, I mean, the example of Malawi, where the judiciary stood up and said, no, this is wrong. But if you are dependent only on the president or one or two other persons, then the whole process would not have happened. And I think this is one of the ways. Okay, civil society plays its role, but then we need to also move from civil society and to have national institutions that are very strong. I would say the next chairperson definitely have part of his or her work carved out through this session.
No, certainly. I think the whole issue of capacity development of parliament and institution building is critical and should be taken on quite seriously. We hear a lot of times that certain heads of states don't want to leave office because they believe they are the only ones who can save the country. This speaks to the issue of strong institutions. If strong institutions can outlive individual leaders, then I believe that the citizenry will also embrace part of what we're talking about currently. And I think a lot of things came out yesterday, just in terms of what happened in Malawi. The whole issue of people, the whole issue of credibility of institutions and individuals in those institutions, I think is what we need to reflect on as part of our election observation mission. I think we've been given quite a few issues to think about. Is it every member of parliament that should go to observe elections? Put differently, is it every judge that should sit and listen to cases that are related to election management and conflict? So I believe that we also need to look at how is it that we've had a a very progressive outcome in Malawi without physical election observation. What does it mean? What can we learn from this process and continue to do as part of building what we already have on the table? And that's quite instructive, where resources are quite strained and will continue to be strained. The economy is completely sliding down. There's more to come with COVID. So I think these are quite progressive discussions that this committee has had, and I'm quite pleased, Chair. Thank you and congratulations to the committee.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Madam SG. As I say, I'm aware of time. We started a little bit, a little late, but I think we are now sort of reaching the end of our discussion. But before we end, I would like our two resource persons to, we'll give each one 2 minutes to give us some final thoughts. Maybe we'll say, Ms. Moyo, if you start off.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson. My concluding remarks really are just 2 points. Firstly, to say that transitional justice, as we know it and as we see the implications and the impact that it has on societies, should be an ongoing process. It should never be an issue of whether we should go through a transitional justice process or not. It should be an ongoing process that we continuously tap into to address some of the occurrences and experiences of violence, violations, and some of the conflicts that continue to erupt, some of the divisions that erupt in society. So we should see it as a long drawn process that needs to continue and that needs to be tapped into to address some of the occurrences on an ongoing process. And secondly, lastly, transitional justice will never be effective if it does not address the context-related issues. It should always be addressing the contextual issues. There can never be a one-size-fits-all to transitional justice. What could be provided are merely guidelines, but again, the context must always determine what process and how it's going to be carried out for it to be successful and to address the realities and the experiences of the people within a nation, within a society, and within a community. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moyo. Your parting words were indeed full of wisdom and will guide us forward. Much appreciated. Dr. Zambara?
Thank you, Chair. My sister has actually taken the words that I was going to conclude by, so I don't have much to say, but just to remind you that one of my former teachers, who is still alive but old now, called Professor Johan Gautum, taught me his wise words that tell me how you manage conflict and I tell you how peaceful you are. So your committee and the SADC Parliamentary Forum has got a chance to tell SADC how to manage conflict for a peaceful SADC. And transitional justice is an important tool that we can all grapple with. We can find ourselves engaging, and hopefully, just like the Ade says, there is no development without peace. There is also no peace without development. There is no reconciliation in poverty. So this work has to continue and build upon every other efforts that improve the livelihoods of the people. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zambara. I think your words of encouragement will definitely go a long way, because as we look at our region, definitely there are still a lot of things for us to do. There's still quite a bit of conflict, and we are managing things pole pole, as they would say in Kiswahili. but I believe we will eventually get there. You see, the quote behind me is from the great Madiba, and I'm not sure whether you can all read it, but it says, "A winner is a dreamer who never gives up." I think that's the work we are all involved in. We are all dreamers because we believe our region, our southern region, should in fact be better. Our people should have better lives, and of course, as far as democracy is concerned, we all believe in strong democracies. So let us all be winners, and therefore let us never give up. Thank you very much again to our two experts and to all the participants. Before I hand over to my dear Kurasha, who has been the chair of chairs, I mean, I said no, he has been the secretary of secretaries. I've been the chair of chairs, because as I said, now we're going, the next part of the session is the elections of the election of the chairperson, the new chairperson, and the vice chairperson. It leaves me only to say thank you very much to the members of the committee for your full support. Like to thank the vice chairperson, my dear Josefina. Together we've done quite a bit of work. I'd like to thank the Secretary General, Ms. Boemo. We saw you being elected as the new Secretary General, and your support to the committee and the great work that you've done have indeed been, will mark me forever. And Kurasha, thank you so much. I mean, over the last 2 years, we've developed such great friendship. And in fact, as I leave the chairmanship of this committee, which I believe has been the best committee within SADC PF, I mean, I live with a bit of a heavy heart, but rest assured that the next step, as you know, I will soon be contesting the presidential elections. But Boemo, I want to tell you, rest assured that should the Almighty grant me victory in this election, SADC PF will have its best fighter. I will, in whatever forum, ensure that the dream to convert SADC PF in a regional parliament will happen, and I will not be scared to talk to those residents. Rest assured of that. You know me by now. So thank you very much for all the support. It's been really great serving SADC PF as the chair of this committee and as the chair of all committees, and I will remain your faithful servant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, Kurasha, for the task that you do so well as the electoral commissioner.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I was nearly having tears dropping on my cheeks as you were giving a very moving farewell speech. We believe we will not lose you, we will not lose your influence. You may be serving in a different capacity, but you will always be a member of the BG committee.
Yes.
Good. Through you, SG, Let me take members to the next level of our activity. Just a moment. So the elections for chairperson and vice chairperson for our committees, I wish to draw members to this document which we have circulated, which speaks to eligibility and procedure for elections for chairpersons and vice chairpersons. The introduction speaks to the fact that the tenure of the current office bearers who were elected in 2018 is coming to an end as we conclude this committee session. And in line with the rules of procedure and the Constitution, they need to retire by rotation, having served their 2 terms. I wish to draw the members specifically to Rule 39 of the rules of procedure, which provide that each committee shall elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson. And sub-rule 2, the chairperson of a standing committee shall preside over all meetings of the committee. In his or her absence, the vice chairperson shall assume those duties, and in the absence of the vice chairperson, a member designated by the committee shall preside over the committee on an interim basis. There is also a provision in Article 14.3 of the SADC rules of, the Constitution relating to rotation. It provides that members of the standing committee shall hold, members of the standing committees holding the position of chairperson or vice chairperson shall retire by rotation, meaning that a member parliament with members serving in the positions of chairperson or vice chairperson of a standing committee shall not be eligible for re-election to the positions in the immediate subsequent term. More importantly, there is also a provision relating to gender principle, which is in Rule 38.5 of the Rules of Procedure, and is to provide as follows: as far as it is practically possible, gender considerations shall be taken into account when deciding chairpersonship of committees. Where the chairperson of a committee is a woman, the vice chairperson shall be a man, and vice versa. And then in the table below, we provide a history of the countries that have held the positions of chairperson and vice chairperson for the DG committee. I also need to highlight to the members that those who have been with the forum long enough will know that we have gone through various transitions between 1999 and 2020 in terms of the Constitution and the rules of procedure which were operational. And some of the provisions that are in the new rules are an improvement, and therefore where you may see patterns where countries were holding positions consecutively from one term to another is because the previous dispensation allowed for such a situation. I will not read through who has held the positions because members, you have this table. Let me proceed to the most important part, honorable members and SG, which is the table relating to eligibility and ineligibility for the position. For the position of chairperson, the countries that have held the position are Zambia, Botswana, Eswatini, Angola, Tanzania, South Africa, Namibia, Mauritius, and Seychelles. And based on the rotation principle, the countries that are eligible in this term are DRC, Lesotho, Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. I wish for us to exhaust the position of chairperson in terms of election before we then move to the position of vice chairperson. And in that regard, if there is any question or objection, I wish to proceed to receiving nominations for the position of chairperson. Are there any nominations for the position of chairperson? Let me highlight, honorable members, that in the event that we get one nomination, that nomination will be declared as the chairperson on a unanimous vote. And if we have more than 2 candidates, we shall call for an election, and during that election, each member will be entitled to 1 vote. With that understanding, may I open for any nominations for the position of chairperson for the DG committee for the period 2020 to 2022. Honorable members, you are free to express yourself verbally. In other words, speak through the screen, and I'll be able to recognize you. Is there any nomination for the position of chairperson?
I'm just, Kurasha, I'm just thinking aloud. The fact that the last chairperson, being myself, was a man, I would like to propose that a woman be elected chairperson, and I would like to propose Mozambique, Honorable Jeremina Agostino. But she's not, I mean, I wouldn't know whether she's ready to accept the responsibility, since she has not been present for the meeting. So what do we do in that case?
Let's hear the sentiment of the committee, and we will be able to take it from there. Other honorable members may come in. Honorable Diakipe.
Sim. Não, muito obrigada, presidente desta sessão. Eu quero concordar, em princípio, com o nosso presidente em termos da nomeação de uma senhora e de Moçambique. Mas, como o próprio presidente referiu, não sabemos se ela aceitará ou não aceitará o posto. Não conheço, digamos, não sei se o presidente nos pode ajudar em termos de indicação se há alguma outra senhora. Não me parece que haja. Poderá, se não houver outra senhora, a minha primeira aposta é Moçambique e a segunda é RDC. Tendo em conta, conhecemos também o deputado que faz parte da nossa comissão da RDC, e é um deputado antigo, tem alguma experiência na comissão, foi dos que nos recebeu, então a minha intervenção é neste sentido. Ficaria bem Moçambique, uma senhora apoiada pela RDC. Se Moçambique não aceitar, então RDC, fazemos vice-versa. Esta é a minha proposta. Obrigado.
There is another proposal on the table. Honorable members, may I get further comments?
Chair, I'm supportive of your proposal of a woman to be chair on a rotational basis. I think we'll be satisfying the gender proportionality in terms of we've had a man, now we can have a woman as chair of the committee.
In that regard, it means we will need to communicate with Mozambique to convey the message that the committee has resolved for a female member, the female member from Mozambique to be the chairperson of the committee. Is that the agreement of the committee?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
In view of the secondment and sentiments expressed by the members, the proposal for us to have a woman, and when you look at the representatives in the category of eligible countries, where we have a woman as a member of the committee, it is in Mozambique.
Yes.
And therefore, the decision of the committee would be to elect the member from Mozambique as the next chair on account of the gender and the rotational principles. And this decision will be conveyed to the member in Mozambique.
Yes.
In other words, the committee has resolved to elect the honorable member from Mozambique as the next chair.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that.
In terms of the, is there any further nomination? We have the nomination of Mozambique, which has been seconded. There is a proposal that we could probably have DRC. Do I take it that the decision to have the member from Mozambique as the next chair is the final decision of the committee, and therefore the member stands elected?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. So, in terms of the constitution and the rules of procedure, I wish to declare the honorable member from Mozambique, Honorable Jeronima Augustinho, as duly elected chairperson for the DG committee for the period 2020 to 2022. Thank you very much, honorable members. We shall now proceed to elect the vice chairperson for the committee. And based on the rotation principle, this vice chairperson must be a man, and the eligible countries are DRC, Lesotho, Madagascar, Mauritius, Malawi, South Africa, and Tanzania. Then nomination, I see Honorable Josephina.
Eu proponho a RDC para a vice-presidência.
There is a proposal for DRC and seconder. Honorable members, may I have someone seconding the nomination of DRC? Zimbabwe, is that a secondment?
Yes, I second.
DRC is the candidate from DRC is seconded. Is there any further nomination?
Yes, I would like to propose South Africa as for the position of vice chairperson.
There is a nomination for South Africa. Is there any secondment? Honorable members, can we have someone seconding the nomination of South Africa as a vice chairperson? Honorable Isedi? Well, yes, Honorable Isedi? Honorable members, we have two candidates being proposed for the position of vice chairperson for the committee. And in terms of the rules, we shall now have to proceed to hold the election. The two candidates are from DRC, Honorable Apalata, no, Honorable Balamage,
Balamag.
and from South Africa, Honorable Darren Begman. I wish to
Apologies, Mr. Kurasha. Could we
Yes,
kindly
yes.
get a seconder for South Africa nomination?
my Honorable Lisedi. Did I get you to be seconding the nomination of South Africa? Am I right? Hello?
We cannot hear him at all.
This is the challenge.
Could you kindly write on the chat box?
Ele, ana so se sa ya no jima thata to ka na mo ya ga a ke ba utlwi ha utlwale
Ra utlwa yaanong, Honorable Lesedi.
oh okay no ke a sekela
O seconder uhi.
South Africa.
Okay. Thank you.
I received
All right.
communication that it was a bit difficult to hear you through the formal system.
Shaunene, there's an issue of network. Honorable said he has just confirmed that he's second in the nomination for South Africa, so we may proceed with the election.
Sure. Thank you very much, SG. And honorable members, as I indicated earlier, in the event that we have more than 2 candidates nominated, we must proceed to hold the election. And in this regard, we shall be voting against the country. What we will do is that we will put our ballot paper on the screen, and honorable members must be able to vote on the screen against the country. And we now invite yes, the ballot paper is showing on the screen, and has 2 candidates, DRC and South Africa. Only honorable members must vote. And please go and select your choice, and then you click submit, which will then send to the Secretariat the results of your vote. Only honorable members are eligible to vote.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
Chair, if I may, can we just, is it possible to introduce ourselves to the delegates voting?
By all means, honorable, that should be fine. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, from South Africa, Darren Bergman. Just to say that a member of Parliament in South Africa, and I also sit on Liberal International, for which is a worldwide movement, and works with the rule of law. And I think this would be a great opportunity for me to introduce the role model law, which is what I'm passionate about, ever since it was introduced in SADC. I also believe that it's something that should be rolled out across SADC. I've been involved with human rights across all over the world. It's been important for me in terms of all the conflict areas in the Middle East, conflict areas in Africa, conflict areas in Asia, and conflict areas across the world with empathy. And important for me in terms of this position would be important in terms of election observations. And I think that in terms of resources, I would like to use South Africa to help us in terms of just upping our election observations. So from my side, that's what I would like to just introduce. And I just wish our candidate from the DRC luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Beckman. The member from DRC is not in the house and therefore is unable to give their speech. Shall we proceed to cast our votes, honorable members? Ask Mr. Ronald to make sure that the ballot is available so that members are able to cast their vote. Honorable members, some of you may not have voted yet. Can we have honorable members voting? Honorable Lisedi, are you able to hear us? Did you cast your vote? Please unmute Honorable Lisedi. Yes, Honorable Lisedi, did you cast your vote? Hello.
Yeah, I did, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. We are collecting the results and the white smoke will be coming out in a moment.
Já triste.
Honorable members, in terms of the result we have, the winner of the 2 votes is South Africa as projected on the screen, who got 8% of the votes. And in terms of the constitution and the rules of procedure, we duly declare Honorable Bergman as the elected vice chairperson for the DG committee for the period 2020 to 2022. Thank you very much.
Okay.
In terms of, since the member from Mozambique is not on board, may I invite the elected vice chairperson to resume the chair seat and say a few words and proceed to adjourn the meeting. Honorable Bergman.
Thank you very much, and I thank everyone for that vote of confidence. And I promise to do the best I can as the vice chair to support our new chair lady, and hope that she does take up the position. And I think that we take up this position at an interesting time with the introduction of the role model booklet. And I think it's important that we take up where our chairperson and our vice chair lady left off. And I think they leave us big shoes to fill. And I know that we will do them proud in trying to fill those big shoes. And we've learned a lot from them. And we thank them very much for the job that they've done. And we will take over from here. And I hope we will do them proud, and I hope we will do the committee proud. And as I say, the role model law, the rolling out of the role model law, I think is going to be crucial in ensuring that the continuity of the project does not die. And I know that with the Secretariat, that this is going to be the focus besides the elections observations. So all that's left from our side is to thank everyone for the successful 2 days. I think that we learned a lot. I think that we absorbed a lot. I think this new way of doing business on Zoom, I think it's better to be in person. I think this is tiring because we don't get to spend time with each other. But hopefully next time we'll be more interactive. And thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Honorable
Congratulations.
members. All the best. Yes, she wants.
Igualmente. Sim.
No, thank you very much, members. Welcome on board, Honorable Darren Bergman. Our offices are open to assist you and to give you all the required support to ensure that the committee maintains its energy and looks into other ways of innovating and moving as per its terms of reference and beyond. Thank you very much to Honorable Wavuram Kalawan, Honorable Josephina Diakite for your leadership as well. We really enjoyed working with you. We enjoyed your leadership, and this committee has grown from strength to strength, and we look forward to you supporting the new chair and the SADC PF in ensuring that we maintain the momentum. All the best, Honorable Chair. See you on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Estou a abrir agora. Abri? Tenho um minutinho. Já liguei. Já liguei. Estão a fazer o... Ok. Sim, senhora. Quero, portanto, por um lado, felicitar a nova direção eleita, particularmente o vice-presidente que está aí presente e pode interagir conosco, e dizer que, naturalmente, para mim é um orgulho, é um prazer participar nesta comissão. Agradecer o apoio que sempre beneficiamos do nosso presidente, ao qual eu desde já também desejo os meus melhores votos em relação ao seu futuro político. O presidente tem ali atrás de si a cotação de Mandela, que é muito... nos indica também o que ele é como lutador e sonhador, e nós desejamos os melhores votos nesse sentido. Presidente, aprendemos muito consigo. Nós chegamos ao fórum, vocês fizeram de mim vice-presidente, tanto o presidente como o secretariado, e, portanto, foi um prazer. Quero que, de facto, possamos continuar nesta senda, e eu estarei disponível para o secretariado do fórum, em conjunto, continuarmos a trabalhar. O presidente, os nossos melhores votos para o seu futuro. E estamos juntos, contamos consigo, como disse, para a transformação do fórum. Inshallah. Muito obrigado. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much, Honorable Diakite.
Hello.
Meu, está a desligar constantemente, não sei porquê.
Russia?
Já abri nova.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, Kurasha, I would like to thank, to first of all congratulate the new office bearers. I wish them all the very best, and they can rest assured of my support as an ordinary member of the committee. I will definitely do anything that I can to help the committee move forward. I believe in the work that the committee did and will continue to do. And I also believe it's probably the most important committee as far as SADC PF is concerned. given the issues that it has to deal with. And democracy lies at the foundation of the organization. So I'd like to wish the lady chairperson and Darren the very best, all the very best. But again, I'd like to thank Josefina. Over the last 2 years, we've developed a very good friendship, and we've always supported each other. It has not just been me supporting you, Josefina, but it's been mutual. So I also like to wish you all the very best in the work that you do. I know during the last 2 years you've also gone through some tough times, and we've been there to support you. So thank you very much, and to all the other members, again, thank you very much, and all the very best to the committee and to our SG as she leads the organization from strength to strength. And of course, to my dearest Kurasha for all the support. Again, brother, we shall meet. Good luck and every blessing.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm humbled. Thank you, Chair. And honorable members, have a lovely day. And we continuing with committee sessions. We have Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources, which is meeting today, tomorrow and day after. And that will conclude our committee sessions. But there are also some committees that are yet to have elections for their chairpersons and vice chairpersons, the ones that met in March. So it's also work that the Secretariat is still doing as we prepare for the 47th Plenary Assembly. We don't know if the situation will allow for the heads of the air to return in time for us to have a face-to-face plenary. Otherwise, we will be knocking on your doors for a virtual meeting of the Plenary Assembly, which will be the first in the history of the forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
With your permission, SG, we wish to dissolve the meeting.
The chair alone dissolve the meeting. Thank you.
And the nice
we're having a closing ceremony.
You see, we are not keen to leave each other. We are so fond of each other. We can't just leave.
Yes, Mozambique has logged in. I hope Mr. Jamie Numau will communicate the outcome of the elections to the Honorable Chair so that we may dispense with that issue.
Yes. Thank you, SG. Bye-bye, honorable members.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Honorable Diakite. I think the legal subcommittee has to meet again. Yes.
Muito obrigada.
Muito bem, muito obrigada.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank you to Mr. Magaza, who continues to cover us. I see he's right there. So thank you for the good coverage in Seychelles as well that we see. We should translate and see if it can go into Angola and Mozambique. That would be good.
I will send you a copy.
Thank you so much.
Okay, lovely. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Sim, senhor. Graças. Muito